Leadership. One of the most important aspects of leadership is communication. And one of the most important aspects of communication is storytelling. That's why I'm so excited to mention the Stories with Traction course with you. In this course, you will learn how to be a great storyteller. I share concepts with you on how you can boost sales, enhance your internal communication and marketing, and create a vibrant company culture. If you're looking to build a story bank for your organization and utilize a framework to persuade more effectively, go check out the course in the show notes, the Stories with Traction course. Now, on to the podcast. Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. One of my favorite parts of being a speaker and speaking around the United States is I get to see different cultures within our country. And I will tell you, speaking in different states, different regions can be different. There's different audiences, and the way we present ourselves are even different. And I've always been fascinated with sociology. What makes people tick? Why are there different cultural norms? In addition, I'm also fascinated by different leadership styles. And as many people listening to this, you've seen different leaders, different shapes, different sizes, different styles. And it always amazes me watching leaders that may be more funny, and then leaders that may be more serious, and leaders that may be more reserved, and leaders that want to get loud and they want to be engaging. And it always fascinates me. But every once in a while, I get to witness a leader that people are drawn to. Someone that has an incredible high level of empathy, but has this ability to connect with people on a very high level. I'm excited because today's guest is one of those leaders. Today, I'm joined by Anna Quinn. She is the co-founder and managing partner of Imprint Talent Readiness. And she's also a Vistage Chair, where she and her husband coach 180 CEOs and executives on how they could be better leaders for their organizations. Welcome, Anna.
Welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you for your time. I know you are extremely busy, so I very much appreciate your time today, and I'm really excited to unpack this. And I just want you to know, so we met in person a couple months ago, and I got to see you in action. And I love watching people as they are inspiring people, as they're encouraging people. They're trying to do everything they can to make an impact on people's life. And I love kind of sitting back and watching that unfold. And you had this ability to really connect with people. And I remember we were talking, and you had mentioned different elements of behavioral assessments that you've taken, and you have other people take. And that may be one of the main reasons why you're able to connect with people on the level that you are, that you're able to. But I want to unpack that. So aside from the assessments that I'm really excited to dive into, what do you think positioned you to have the ability to connect with people the way that you do?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's experience. It's me observing other leaders and learning from them, learning what they do, how they do it, as much as how they either don't do it or, ooh, why are they doing it that way? So it's learning from both spectrums. So being in the workforce for the many decades that I have been, I've seen a lot, and I've worked in a lot of different organizations. So that's helped my education and my growth.
Sure. I like how you say, ooh, And, some of the bad things that leaders do. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind where you've watched something unfold where you pause and you say, wow, I definitely don't want to do that or conduct myself in that manner?
Yeah, I can recall being in meetings at times, and I'm more of a reflector. I like to kind of sit back and observe and kind of see what's going on. And I would watch the behaviors of people, and sometimes I would see someone either be like really direct or almost kind of put people down in a meeting, and then I would self-reflect and say, oh my gosh, I hope I don't show up that way, or I hope I've never come across that way. And then I looked at other people and I've seen how they've inspired and how they've really, brought people together, and achieved consensus. And those people are inspiring to me. It's like, wow, I want to be like them when I grow up. How can I do more of that? Because you see the impact. When people do something negative, you see people recoil, and you see people almost shut down and feel dismissed. And then when a leader is inspiring, or brings in the different perspectives in the room and appreciates the different perspectives and isn't the person who knows it all, right? That to me is inspiring. There's consensus there because they're appreciating the different perspectives and bringing them all together to achieve better results. So
it's a really good point. And I wanna unpack the element of that reflector piece. And I don't want people to lose sight of this, because I really think it ties back to humility, right? Because we're humbling ourselves to at least allow ourselves to have that reflection. And here's why I think that's so incredible. You're an extremely successful person, and you've been able to do what a lot of people have never even dreamed of doing in the coaching world, right? You literally are a leader of leaders. And it amazes me the level of humility you have to continue to learn, even though you've had decades of experience in learning. So is there anything in your life that positioned you to have that level of humility, or do you just realize that it's something we need as leaders?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that came to mind, Matt, when you asked me that question, is my dad. My dad was extremely humble. And he was always about bringing people in and listening to other people. And he always wanted to learn about everybody. So I had a great role model in dad. Dad was I'm Cuban. So thanks to Esso or Exxon today, Dad worked for Esso. He started as a mail boy in the company and worked his way up to become controller. And in 1960, when things were going on in Cuba, my dad and another gentleman were hand-selected to move to South Florida and move Esso there. So I saw him through his career and whatnot. He stayed at Esso his entire life. I mean, he started as a mail boy, retired as a controller. So he was a role model to me about, being accepting of everybody. Everybody brings something to the table. So learn from others, get to know other people, because you're going to learn from them. So I think that's what kind of inspired me.
Yeah, it's amazing how, as we unpack elements of our story, how it directed us to make us tick in the ways that we do. I think I'm always fascinated by that, especially the psychology of it all. And we could look at our parents and grandparents and our family and see different instances of, hey, that's why I operate the way I do, which is fascinating to me. It reminded me of my grandmother who went through the Great Depression. Never talked of the horrors of that era. She only talked about what she learned. And she was such an empathetic person. My grandmother could connect with the janitor. She could connect with the CEO, right? She had this incredible level of connectivity and empathy. And there's an element of that humility aspect, that empathy, where maybe we've struggled with something, or maybe we've gone through a tough time, and we realize that other people are in that tough time, and it just empowers us to connect with people on a much deeper level. So I appreciate you mentioning your father.
Yeah. Thank you for telling me about your grandmother.
Yeah, she was quite the woman. I learned a lot about how to treat people with respect and dignity, because when it's all stripped away, right? Like as what was happening with her and her family during the Great Depression, you lose a ton. a lot of people are in the same boat. So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what title, what position, what house someone is in. If they lose the house and they lose everything that they hold dear, it really brings it down to that human element where we are all people. And it was just fascinating to learn from her. So I there's a lot of stories that I learned from my grandmother. So I very much appreciate that. So thank you for sharing elements of your family story as well. Do you think that, you had mentioned that immigrant story, do you think that was a big piece to work ethic for you?
Yes. Yes, I think it was. My parents they left everything in Cuba. They literally got on a plane, moved to Miami, and then they went back and picked up my two older brothers. So they came with the shirts on their back. Now, grateful that he had a job, obviously, right? SO believed in him. So he was truly grateful for that. And he started, and I observed him growing up. And so I think it was at a core of what my work ethic is, don't complain. You have many blessings, be grateful, and charge forward.
Wow.
And treat people with respect along the way, because you need people and everybody brings something to the table. You'll learn from everybody. There's always something to be learned from people. And everybody has their own story, right?
Sure. It's a really, really good perspective. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because everyone's different. Yep. Right. The behaviors that we show are different in many ways. And so I want to talk more about something that we started to talk about a few months ago. I'm fascinated with this. I really love diving into personality aspects, into what makes us tick, into our background. And you had mentioned elements of the importance of behavioral assessments, taking leaders and get them to understand different elements of their behavior, what drives them, why do they act the way they do. So let's dive in to this. So let's talk about the behavioral assessment that you recommended that I take. And now that I've taken it, I recommend other people take, right? So I took this assessment and it gauged different elements of why I do what I do. Can you unpack elements of that for us? Why would leaders want to understand why they do what they do, and why their team members do what they do?
Yeah, let's back it up a little bit. It's the power of data, right? You took the assessment, took you less than 5 minutes, and you instantly got a report. And there's 3 graphs, and it's data. And really, the premise of this assessment is that it measures what drives people. And based on those drives, what do they need? And how does that show up in behaviors? So these assessments are for the workplace. This isn't Match.com type stuff, right? It's for the work environment. And if you could have data, and that data would allow leaders to predict behavior at work, how powerful is that? When you think about it, organizations use financial data to make predictions. They use sales data to make predictions. There's if you're in the biotech, whatever, you use research data to make predictions. Our kids, your kids are younger, my kids are in their 20s now. They used to, play on their Xbox and look at profiles of FIFA players. They would look at the data of the FIFA players, right, to create the best teams. Well, why aren't organizations paying attention to their people data, their most important asset? Why aren't they looking at people data, so that they can make predictions at work, so that they can get the right people in the right seat of the bus to achieve the lofty goals that organizations have to make an impact in the world?
All right, so this is so powerful. Okay, it's for so many different ways, and this is why I'm so excited to talk to you about this. So I really appreciate the correlation, well, the analogy, so to speak, regarding the financial data versus the power of data through the behavioral aspect. Okay, so businesses can see what's happening in the marketplace, and they can take those data points and they can make investments in certain areas to at least position it for growth, right? So the financial aspect. Why would people want to unpack the behavioral data? Well, everyone is touting how awesome their company culture is. And if they don't have a great company culture, they want to have a great company culture. And a lot of that goes back to inspiring their team, really getting buy-in. And I love what you're saying about the power of data, because if you have teams that are filled with different people that have different behavioral norms, the way we're going to communicate that team, to those individuals are going to be different. That's why it's so powerful to unpack elements of this data. So let's talk about that. Let's say different businesses take this assessment, and let's say that they have a high percentage of individuals that fall into a certain category. How can they use that data to drive their decisions and how they communicate with those employees?
So understanding I often refer to it as, what is someone's behavioral DNA, right? What drives you, Matt, might be very different than what drives me. And guess what? That's okay. So let's make sure that we put Matt in the right role to drive whatever those organizational goals are. And let's put Anna where her behavior actually matches the behavior of the role that she is in. So simple example for those in the sales world. Oftentimes we hear there's a hunter role and a farmer role. I don't know if you're familiar with those two terms. If you're in sales, you do. The hunter role is a role that requires somebody to be competitive, to be autonomous, to be independent. They love the competition. They're going out there to meet their metrics and to sell and to get the commissions. And there's a competitive streak in them, right? The hunter is more of, hey, team environment, consensus. I want to take care of the account. I want to nurture the account. I want the account to be happy. We want to retain the account. You don't want to put a farmer in a hunter role, and you don't want to put a hunter in a farmer role. Why? You want people to operate at full optimization. They're jazzed about what they do. They love their role. They're energized. They're engaged. They're all in. Their gas tank is full. If you put a farmer in a hunter role or vice versa, what you're going to do is deplete the gas tank, because now you're asking someone to operate from a different behavioral perspective than what the job requires. So I'm a farmer. My husband, Chris, who you know, is a hunter. We're in business together. So what do? We look at our behavioral DNA. We're different in many ways, but think of the power of how we leverage our differences to be able to run a business together. So we actually said these types of roles. I actually did color-coded swim lanes, okay, because I'm very high detail. And I said, Chris, you do these tasks because these tasks require the behaviors that you're naturally wired at and you're great at because you love it. So you're going to do it. I'll take these because these are tasks that require the behavioral DNA of how I'm wired. So I'm aligned to those tasks. Does that make sense? Was that a good analogy?
That was fantastic. What would you say to individuals that think their role in the organization is better than others? What if you get a situation where the hunters feel that they're better than the farmers in an organization? How as a leader would you inspire people to understand that we need both of those elements? We
need both. Hey, hunter, go out and secure all of these accounts. Now, once you've secured them, guess what? You're going to hand them over to the farmers, and the farmers are going to help retain them. So together, working together, diversity of perspective, diversity of behavioral DNA, but together we're going to achieve greater outcomes. The worst thing that could happen is that the hunter is out there securing new business, handing it over to a farmer who's not interested, and guess what? They're going to lose those accounts. So everybody loses. The hunter loses because their reputation might be impacted. Yeah, I'll buy from you, but then you can't sustain me, right? So there has to be that alignment of working together.
Yeah, no, I like that. And also the hunter that really wants to bring in the business and they get so excited about winning that could potentially lose it by not understanding the importance of the farmers in the organization. So I think that's really important. Now, what happens if there's a business that they have roles that are assigned to the wrong people? What kind of action plan would you give them to I believe it was Jim Collins in the book Good to Great, you got to get the right people on the bus and the right butts on the right seats on the bus. Like, what happens if you have the wrong people on the wrong buses? There's the wrong people. Like, what happens if it's a mess? Where would you recommend a leader even start to unpack that and assign different roles?
I would look at the behavioral DNA of the job roles and map that out. What type of behaviors do you need for designated types of roles? And then, with the behavioral assessment, you can match it. Right. So we had a case where, we work with a local company here, and they were growing rapidly during the pandemic. And at times they were just hiring to hire to put people in seats. And I had one of their vice presidents call me up and said, I'm struggling. I've got people that just aren't working in this role. And I said, well, did you do the assessment? Did you do this? And she goes, no, HR just hired these people, gave them to me. And I said, okay, tell me what the role is. They took the assessment. I'll call you back in 15 minutes. So I mapped out the behavioral DNA of the role, called her back and said, let me guess. These are the two issues that you're juggling with these two people. She goes, how'd you know? And I said, well, you've got two people who are very social and lack attention to detail. And you've put them in a role where they need to be very introspective, heads down, and pay attention to the detail. So there was a mismatch. There wasn't an alignment. So these are the behaviors you're getting. And by the way, I can predict you're going to get more of this.
Wow.
So based on those gaps, you can either redeploy people and put them in a role that they're better, or start coaching them and make them aware of where they're not aligned. So you're now giving, I gave her the data, and it was like a diagnostic, right? We gave her the data. This is what you do with it now. So it gave her insights, and it gave her an action plan of how she could better lead those two people so that they're successful. Because you don't want to lead to reprimand, right? And by the way, they want to be in a role where they thrive. So how can you redeploy people in an organization and put them on the right seat of the bus so that they get it and they want it? And they're going to thrive. Then they're going to be happy. Everybody's happy, happy culture, happy organization. And when everybody's happy, guess what? Results are the outcome.
It's a really good point. So are these roles, are these behavioral aspects so a part of us that we couldn't shift? So, you had mentioned coaching. I believe you're referring to it in a different way than this, but can a hunter be coached to be a farmer? Can a farmer be coached to be a hunter?
Well, what you could do with the assessment is it brings in self-awareness, and that's where leadership starts, right? I mean, the word self-awareness is utilized. There was a study done in Harvard several years ago, and I think the outcome was 95% of the people thought they understood self-awareness and that they themselves as leaders were self-aware. Yet the results show that only 15% were. Okay. So, to me, the assessment kind of highlights, yep, that's me, right? It's almost creepy accurate. It almost like profiles you to the T, right? But it starts from there. Hey, if one of your factors is high over here, you're competitive, you're autonomous, you have an idea and you want to run with your idea because you think your idea is the right idea, right? And as a leader, be careful, especially if you're leading a group of 10. Are you not tapping into your team and bouncing off your idea with them and say, what do you guys think about my idea? Or are you running off with your idea and totally dismissing your team's perspective? Great that you're autonomous, great that you're competitive, great that you're a visionary, great that you have great ideas, but at what cost? You're not, there's blind spots, I should say, right? What are your blind spots? And as a leader, we have to know what our blind spots are so that we can flex. And so it starts with that premise of self-awareness. And that's where leadership starts. Are you self-aware not only of your own style, but of the impact that you're having on others? And then you can work on that. Okay, what do I have to work on? And where do I need to become more aware so that I can be more understanding and flexible? Oftentimes we grew up with the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you want to be done unto, right? A lot of times Chris and I introduced the platinum rule. And the platinum rule is a slight shift. It's do unto others as they need to be done unto. So how do I need to talk to Matt? Because Matt's wired differently. How do I need to talk to Chris? He's wired very differently. How do I need to speak to Sally? Because they all have different drives, different needs. So I have to be very flexible in my leadership and be sensitive to that, because I want them to be happy. I want them to achieve their all. It's not about me being a leader. It's about how can I best help them too, so that they achieve. And you pass the baton, right? And then the cycle continues. That makes sense.
I love that. It's like being vanilla, right? Vanilla goes with peach cobbler and it goes with chocolate drizzle, right? We have to be vanilla and we have to, yeah, I love that, being chameleon. So to dive deeper, just so people can get an understanding of the different aspects of the behavior, what are some of the names, if you will, that are associated with different behaviors?
So, we've talked a lot about the person who's autonomous and whatnot. The opposite of someone who's autonomous is someone who's all about the team. It's all about consensus. They have an idea and they want to bounce it off other people and come up with the best idea. Another factor is, what's your preferred method of communication? There are some people who I like to say they speak without a filter, meaning as they're ideating, they're cutting it loose and they're kind of creating their idea out loud. They're vetting it out loud. Other people are more introspective, right? Someone's talking about an idea and you can see their brain cells churning because they're analyzing the idea and they're chewing on it, so to say, right? Some people thrive on change. They're very intense. You can see in their work style the intensity that they work at. They love variety. They like to juggle 50 million things and change. They're like the instigators of change in an organization. Yet there's others that are more about predictability and steady Eddie. I always say those are the marathon runners. Steady Eddie, I'm going to run these 26 miles at the same pace. Don't rock my world. Don't change my priorities 10 times a day. You want me to change? Tell me why. I'm not going to change because you say so. So the messaging is different. Then there's some people who are all about structure, detail orientation, right and wrong. We need an SOP. We need rules for that. Hey, you're not following the rules. And there's other people that say, hey, rules are a guideline. They don't apply to me. I need flexibility. So if you understand those factors, and some people are risk averse, some people are open to risk. So if you understand that, you're going to approach and communicate differently. You're going to reach decisions differently because you're understanding the perspectives that are coming in. My husband and co-founder of the business, he's open to risk. He's more of a strategic, visionary type person. Yours truly is more about risk aversion, right? So we can either drive each other nuts, or we could leverage. So when he pops into my office with this big idea, I put on the oxygen mask. I go, oh, here he comes again with a big idea. I start turning that big idea into the tactical pieces. Okay, what do we have to do? Have you thought about this? And he goes, you think about that, you'll get it done. Right? So different roles. If it wasn't for his vision, we wouldn't be where we are today. I certainly would not have come up with this vision. So that's an example of let's leverage our differences, let's find our strengths, and let's respect those differences. Because they're both good. It's not whether one's good and one's bad. They're both good.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
How do you leverage that?
Sure. So let's unpack, just so people understand this even more. Let's unpack elements of the assessment that I did. So, and I highly recommend people take this assessment at the end. Anna will mention where you can go to get this assessment, but I did the assessment and I came out as a controller. So let's talk about that first. I don't know if I like that name, but it's which again goes back to me wanting to control the situation. So let's talk about controller. So detail oriented, that fits me to a T. And then I read through here, there's a multiple page document that breaks down different things about what I excel at, different things that I should be mindful of. And it goes through that. So let's talk about a controller. So if someone listening would fit into that controller box, what are some of the things that they would know that they have, or maybe their spouse would know that they have?
Okay, so there's 17 profiles, just to take a step back. There's 17 total profiles. They're all good profiles. They just all map out what is your behavioral DNA. A controller is someone who is independent. They like autonomy. They have an idea. They like to run with their idea. High detail orientation, which means they like the structure. They're a rules maker and follower, right and wrong. strong attention to detail. They're okay with looking at the detail, and it's natural for them. Controller also likes change. So you like variety, Matt. You like to juggle 50 million things at the same time. Change is okay for you. And you operate at a high level of intensity, right? I mean, think about all the things that you do and how busy you are, and you're flying all over the place. That's okay for you because you like the variety, you like the change, all the different people that you meet. What's interesting is one of your factors is right smack in the middle in one of your graphs. You're like me on that. And in that factor, that one is your preferred method of communication, right? So at times, Matt, you can be more outspoken and persuade, kind of speak high level. I always say, at times you can speak without a filter. So as you're speaking, you're ideating and it's coming out, right? And you're kind of framing that idea out loud. But at times too, Matt, you can be very reflective. So you need time to think, time to analyze. And that's the controller. The other things that you can learn about a controller is that they tend to be risk averse. Is that correct? Are you risk averse?
100%.
Okay.
I only take calculated risks, and they need to be highly calculated for me to take the risk.
Right. But you're more risk averse. You are more formal in your approach. When you approach people and you communicate, you're more formal. You're a stickler for rules. You're very cautious with rules. You respect rules. And you can also be very task oriented. Got to get this done, this done. So that's more of the controller profile, but very analytical. And that's why. But I must say, when people get that, they don't like the word controller. But that's okay. It's a good profile, Matt. It maps out your DNA. You're independent, you're autonomous, you like change, you like variety, you're all about structure and detail orientation, yet your preferred method of communication is flexible. You can either ramp it up or you can be more reflective and analytical. Does that sound like you?
It does, to a T. And I want people to recognize how they could use this to benefit them. So as I took the assessment, something really stuck out to me that's really important when it comes to business, my business. And I want people to understand this. So Anna, you mentioned structure. Yes, I am a highly structured person. I work within systems. I like building systems around different aspects of business, and I like working the systems, okay? One of the huge drawbacks to my profile, if you will, something that I've struggled with and I've battled for years, but it's so important to recognize. I understand the unbelievable importance of creativity in business, but it's something that I've struggled with for years. And I want people to understand. So if they have this controller profile, they may be struggling with creativity as well. So for me personally, I had to work at this. And I had to work at this because that's how innovation is birthed in business. That's how we have all these different ideas and we can go and there's all these different projects and new clients we can serve. We have to be creative in order to do that. So it is like, sometimes it's like pulling teeth for me to create new initiatives. But once they're created, I'm going to build systems around them and I'm going to have all the structure and it's going to be great. It's building it out that can be agonizing for me. So for someone that has, and when I say I struggled and I've worked on it, for 4 years, I did improv comedy just so that I can try to get my mind in a creative state, right? Because I've recognized one of the most challenging aspects of me was my ability to get in that creative state, which I needed to change. So if anyone else is listening, is that highly structured person, but they're also really struggling to get out of their serious systematic approach and embrace creativity, what would you recommend to someone to do if they're not willing to do 4 years of improv comedy?
Well, honestly, I mean, kudos to you for having the self-awareness, right? Of that. Of, hey, I have these strengths and I have these blind spots. I mean, I often tell people, partner up with someone that's different than you, because you can learn about them and how they're creative, or maybe they can inspire you by saying something, right? An idea, and then you go build it. Right. I mean, I've been surrounded, again, my husband, he's very creative. He's always thinking big picture. I always have to pause because I can't think big picture. He's more strategic. I'm more the tactical. It's like, okay, tell me what your dream is. Tell me what your vision is. Because my strength is I'm going to make it a reality because that's my behavioral wiring. I'll pay attention to the details. I'll build the structure. And that's where, oftentimes I talk a lot about diversity of perspective or diversity of DNA, and surround yourself with people who are different than you from a behavioral DNA perspective, because that's where you build the strong team. If you put, a bunch of, sane people on a team, everybody's going to jump off the cliff, right? Because they're all thinking big picture. Hey, this is great. Here's our big idea. No one's thinking about, whoa, hold on, Tonto or Toto, right? We have to think about this, and this. So where are the checks and balances? And that's where, to me, the behavioral, the diversity of the perspective of the behaviors on a team is what makes the team strong, while allowing you to learn from other people. And then you can achieve more. If everybody's cut from the same cloth, exactly the same way, you're going to get one way to do it versus multiple ways. And that's where a leader can really embrace and lead their team to draw out the best in others so that they in turn can be the best of themselves, have the self-awareness, and achieve the greater results. And then everybody's happy. You have a thriving culture because people are coming from a point of respect and understanding. If I'm wired one way and I understand that and I have the self-awareness, I'm going to have the self-awareness, hey, Matt's wired differently. So let me understand Matt, and where can Matt and I flex to best communicate, best reach the decisions that we need to, and best work together and appreciate our differences for the greater good. Sure.
Are there any of these 17 profiles that there's an inability to lead?
No, they can all lead.
Are there any of these profiles that would potentially hinder someone in certain roles in an organization?
No, where it might hinder is if that person, if a certain profile is in a job that is not wired to be aligned to that profile, then that gas tank will be depleted and you'll have someone that's not happy, not aligned, not engaged, and they're out the door. Or they're just not performing because they're not wired to do that kind of a job.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's important for people to take this assessment so they understand the inner workings of their organization. And Anna, thank you so much for your time today. I very much appreciate it. I appreciate everything you brought to the table, all these different elements. I got 3 different takeaways that I'm going to process even after this conversation, that my key takeaways. I really appreciate you mentioning the power of data. It's so important. And I appreciate you mentioning, just like businesses will analyze financial data so they understand where to put money, we need to analyze the different data within our organization, what makes us tick. I appreciate that. I also appreciate the behavioral DNA. What are the different behaviors that make up your team? That's really important to recognize. And the third and final piece, I really appreciate you mentioning the importance of this is self-awareness. We need to understand our blind spots so that we are not doing things we shouldn't do when it comes to our teams. That all goes back to self-awareness. So thank you again. I appreciate it. If anyone wants to get more information on what you do, they want to take this assessment, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Anna Rios Quinn, and it's Anna with 1 N, or they can go to our website. It's www.imprinttalent.com.
Perfect. I will include those in the show notes. People can just click and get to your LinkedIn as well as your website. But again, thank you so much, Anna. I very much appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that our paths crossed several months ago. It's truly a gift. So
likewise, I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.